I stood outside the living room holding my breath, heart pounding. My children didn't know I was listening. "She's too expensive to care for," Daniel muttered. "She's had a good run," Linda added. Brian just laughed. They were talking about me, like I was a burden, after everything I gave up for them. In that moment, something inside me changed. I wasn't going to beg for love or respect. I smiled quietly and reached for my phone. Subscribe if you believe every parent deserves respect, no matter their age. I didn't always have gray hair and aching knees. Once upon a time, I was just a young mother trying to hold everything together after my husband passed. Daniel was 13, Linda was 10, and Brian had just turned 7. We had no savings, barely enough to cover the funeral, and a mountain of bills with no mercy. But I told myself one thing over and over: your kids will have better. I took 2 jobs, cashier during the day, cleaner at night. I slept maybe 4 hours a night for years. But I never let them see how tired I was. I made pancakes on Saturdays. I kissed every scraped knee. I showed up to every school recital, even if I had to walk through the snow after an overnight shift. When Daniel wanted to go to college, we didn't have the money. So I sold my wedding ring, the last gift my husband ever gave me. I never told Daniel where the money came from. I just handed him a check and said, "Go chase your dream, baby." Linda struggled in her 20s. She had 2 miscarriages, and her marriage nearly fell apart. When she needed a down payment for a house, I dipped into my retirement savings. "It's just money," I told her. "You need a fresh start." Brian. Well, he was always the wild one. He bounced between jobs, got into trouble here and there, but I never turned him away. I cooked him meals, paid off a few of his debts, and even let him move back in his 30s, just for a while. That while turned into 3 years. I gave and gave and gave, because that's what mothers do. We pour out our hearts hoping our kids will turn out all right, hoping they'll remember. But now I was too expensive, like a broken lamp or an old car that cost more to fix than replace. The day after I overheard them, I sat at the kitchen table holding an old photo album. Page after page of birthdays, graduations, scraped knees, and sleepy smiles. They were so small once, so full of love and need. I wondered when that need turned into resentment, when my name started becoming a problem to solve instead of a person to love. Linda came by later that afternoon with a list of nursing homes. "Just options," she said, like it was nothing. Like sending me away was just a paperwork decision. I smiled and nodded. "Thank you, sweetie. I'll take a look." Daniel called next. "We just think this might be best, Mom. A place where you'll get proper care. It's not personal." Not personal, but it was. Every time I gave up something for them, it was personal. Every time I held their hands and wiped their tears and said, "I've got you." It was deeply, painfully personal. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just let them talk. That night, I called Mr. Thompson, my late husband's old friend, and now my lawyer. "It's time," I told him. "Let's move ahead with the papers." "Are you sure, Ruth?" he asked gently. "I've never been more sure," I said. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about making sure I was never treated like a burden again. I had loved my children with everything I had. But now, it was time to love myself enough to act. And that's exactly what I planned to do. I arrived with just 1 suitcase and a plastic bag of toiletries. Daniel had picked the place. "It's not fancy, but it's what we can manage," he told me, holding the door open but never once stepping inside. The building looked tired. The paint was peeling near the front entrance, and the air smelled like boiled cabbage and bleach. A nurse with tired eyes greeted me without a smile. "You're the new one? Room 108. Follow me." As I walked down the hallway, I passed slumped figures in wheelchairs. Some stared blankly at the floor. Others muttered to themselves. One woman sat by the window crying softly, ignored by everyone. My room was tiny, barely enough space for a single bed, a dresser, and a chip table. The mattress sagged in the middle. A small television mounted to the wall played static. "Dinner's at 5, the nurse said. "Lights out by 9. Don't wander." She left before I could ask her name. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the silence press in. For a moment, I let the sadness wash over me. Was this really where they thought I belonged? A room smaller than the pantry in the home I raised them in? But then I reminded myself. This was only the beginning. I wasn't here to wither. I was here to watch, to see how far they'd let me fall. I spent my first week keeping quiet. I played the role they expected, slow, confused, a little forgetful. It didn't take much. I simply paused longer before answering. I asked for help putting on my sweater. I let them assume, and it worked. The staff stopped looking me in the eye. When I asked for water, they said, "Just wait, sweetie." When I asked to call my family, they said, "Maybe later." And when I cried, real tears, one night when the loneliness hit me hard, no one came. But while they ignored me, I paid attention. I watched the head nurse sneak cigarettes in the stairwell. I noticed that the night staff disappeared for hours at a time. I saw a resident's daughter slip cash into the receptionist's hand. And I wrote everything down in a little notebook I kept hidden under my pillow. One morning, I saw Mr. Carter, a retired teacher 2 doors down, fall in the hallway. He lay there groaning for nearly 5 minutes before anyone came. When the nurse finally showed up, she rolled her eyes and said, "Again?" Like his pain was an inconvenience. That night, I made another call to Mr. Thompson. "I need you to look into this place," I said. Quietly. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "Understood." A few days later, Sophie came to visit. My sweet granddaughter. The only one who still treated me like a person. She brought cookies and a framed photo of the 2 of us at her high school graduation. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked, brushing hair from my face. I hesitated. For the first time, I wanted to tell someone everything, but I couldn't risk it yet. Not until the time was right. "I'm fine, darling," I said. "Just a little tired." She looked unconvinced. Her eyes lingered on the crack in the wall behind me. On the tray of food I hadn't touched. But she didn't push. She just squeezed my hand. After she left, I took the photo and set it on the table beside my bed. It reminded me why I was doing this. Not out of bitterness, but for clarity. To see the truth of what my children thought of me. To learn who would stand by me when it counted. This place may have looked like the end, but for me it was just the middle of something much bigger. It was Sophie who found the letter. She'd been visiting me more often, each time bringing little things to brighten up my dull room. A blanket, fresh fruit, even nail polish one afternoon. That day, she stayed longer than usual. While I was dozing off in my chair, she started flipping through the old handbag I kept at the foot of my bed, looking for my knitting needles. That's when she found the letter. It was in a plain envelope, yellowed at the edges, with her name on it, written in my shaky cursive from years ago. I'd forgotten it was there. Or maybe a part of me had always hoped she'd find it one day. When I opened my eyes, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding it carefully. "Grandma," she said softly, "what is this?" I sat up straight, the sleep gone from my body. "That was meant for you, but maybe not yet." Her eyebrows drew together. "Can I read it?" I hesitated, then nodded. "If you're ready." She peeled open the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. It wasn't long. Just a single sheet, but the words in it held weight. "My dearest Sophie, if you're reading this, it means you still care. It means you haven't forgotten me. There's a key taped to the bottom of this page. It opens a safety deposit box at Franklin First Bank. Box number 204. What's inside is yours, but don't tell anyone. Not yet. Just trust me. Love always, Grandma Ruth." Sophie looked up, eyes wide. She flipped the letter over and found the small metal key taped behind it. "Grandma," she whispered. "What's in the box?" I smiled faintly. "Go find out." The next morning, she went to the bank. Later that afternoon, she came rushing into the nursing home, her face flushed and her hands shaking. She waited until we were alone in the corner of the common room before she leaned in and whispered, "There's a will, a new one, and account statements, and a letter to a lawyer." I nodded calmly. She shook her head in disbelief. "You changed everything. Years ago." "I did," I said. "After your father and your aunt started asking for money like it was owed to them. After Brian came to me one day and asked me to sell my house so he could pay off gambling debt. That's when I knew I had to protect what little I had left." Sophie sat in stunned silence. "The will leaves everything to you," I told her quietly. "The house, the savings, the lake property your grandfather bought. All of it." She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "But why me?" "Because you're the only one who visits without wanting something. Because you remember my birthday without needing Facebook to remind you. Because when you look at me, you still see your grandmother. Not a burden." Her eyes filled with tears. "I haven't told anyone else," I continued. "Not Mr. Thompson, not your father. And I don't want you to either. Not yet." She nodded quickly, wiping her cheek. "I won't. I promise." I reached for her. The days at the nursing home crawled by, each one blending into the next. Breakfast, pills, TV, lunch, bingo, more pills. Dinner at 5, lights out by 9. A quiet routine meant to keep us numb and still. But I wasn't still. I was watching, waiting, planning. One night, as the hallway lights dimmed and the sounds of distant coughing faded, I heard a soft knock on my door. 3 taps, then silence. I sat up slowly. That was our signal. I opened the door just a crack and saw him, Mr. Thompson, my lawyer and one of the few people I still trusted. He stepped in quickly, adjusting his coat. "You look well," he said in a whisper, smiling faintly. "I've had better days," I replied, pulling the chair out for him. He took a seat and pulled out a folder from his bag. "Everything is in place. The account transfers, the updated will, the property protections. Sophie has access to what she needs, and I've arranged for her to be listed as your emergency guardian." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Thank you, Robert." "You're sure about this?" he asked, lowering his voice further. "Once we act, there's no undoing it." I looked at him firmly. They made their choice when they handed me over to strangers and never looked back. He nodded solemnly. "And Sophie?" "She's ready," I said. "She's been visiting me more often, watching the staff, taking notes. She even caught them giving expired medication to one of the residents." He raised an eyebrow. "That could be serious." I nodded. "It is, and we're documenting everything." Mr. Thompson slid the folder back into his bag. Then he handed me a small black cell phone. "Only Sophie and I have the number. Use it when you're ready. Don't call from the facility phone again. Too risky." I took it and slipped it under my mattress. "They won't even know I'm gone until it's too late." He stood up and adjusted his coat again. "I'll check in with Sophie tomorrow. We're almost there, Ruth. Just a few more days." I walked him quietly to the hallway. He gave me a reassuring nod before disappearing down the corridor. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. All the pieces were in place. The updated will? Done. My accounts? Moved. Property? Shielded. Power of attorney? Granted to Sophie. Backup plans? Filed and signed. All that was left was the exit. 2 mornings later, I faked a health emergency. I waited until the nurse shift changed and called out, clutching my chest and gasping for air. The response was chaotic. They rushed in with a wheelchair, oxygen tank, and panic. They called an ambulance and loaded me in without checking my ID bracelet. At the hospital, I stayed silent and still, letting them do their tests. I had no chest pain, of course, but I played the part perfectly. When the attending doctor stepped out to get my blood work, I slipped out of the room with Sophie waiting just outside, her coat wrapped around me. "Let's go, Grandma," she whispered, guiding me to the stairwell. We didn't go back to the nursing home. Instead, we drove 2 hours north to a safe, quiet place Mr. Thompson had arranged, a cozy cabin near the lake my late husband once loved. I sat by the window, watching the water shimmer under the sunlight, sipping tea Sophie made for me. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. Back at the nursing home, they'd eventually realize I was gone. My children would get a call. They'd panic, maybe pretend to care. But by then, it wouldn't matter, because I was no longer under their control. And the next phase had already begun. It took exactly 3 days before they noticed I was gone. The nursing home staff had scrambled when I didn't return from my supposed cardiology appointment. They called the hospital, then the ambulance company, then finally, my children. The moment Daniel heard I'd disappeared, he called Mr. Thompson in a panic. Linda followed with a flurry of angry voicemails. Brian didn't even bother calling. He sent a text. "What's going on with Mom?" Like I was a broken appliance someone forgot to plug back in. Mr. Thompson already had everything in motion, just as we'd planned. Each of my children received a letter, hand-delivered in crisp white envelopes bearing his office seal. Inside was the truth. Daniel's letter. "Daniel, you once asked me to sell the house so you could invest in a condo project. I declined. You never asked how I was managing, only how much I had left to give. When I needed your presence, you sent money. When I needed care, you sent forms. You called me expensive, but never once remembered what I paid for you to become the man you are. I've decided to make new arrangements. And no, you won't be consulted. Ruth." Linda's letter. "Linda, you were always the quiet one. I thought you'd understand me better than the others. But when it mattered, you stood silently in the room while they planned to ship me off like forgotten furniture. I begged for dignity. And you offered convenience. You chose peace over presence. So I chose differently too. Mom." Brian's letter. "Brian, I bailed you out more times than I can count. I believed in your second chances. Third, fourth. I opened my door, my wallet, and my heart. But when I became inconvenient, you vanished. You laughed while they called me too expensive. You won't be laughing when you see what I've done." Mom. The aftermath was predictable. Daniel came storming into Mr. Thompson's office the next day. "This is insane," he shouted. "Where is she? What is this about?" Mr. Thompson, calm as ever, simply handed him a printed copy of my updated will. Daniel read the first page, and his face turned pale. Everything, the house, my savings, my investments, the cabin, the jewelry, even the land that had been in our family for 3 generations, was being transferred to Sophie. She wasn't just a beneficiary, she was now my full legal power of attorney, my caretaker, my sole inheritor. "Why her?" Daniel demanded. Mr. Thompson folded his hands. "Because she showed up." Linda called that evening. Her voice was trembling. "Mom, I didn't know. I never meant for any of this to happen." I listened quietly through the burner phone Mr. Thompson had given me. I didn't say a word. "Please," she begged. "Can we talk? I'll come find you, wherever you are." But I ended the call. Sophie sat beside me at the lake cabin, watching the water ripple gently under the afternoon sun. She didn't ask me what was said. She just handed me a warm cup of tea and placed a hand over mine. "They're going to come looking," she said softly. "I know," I replied. "But I'm not hiding. I'm resting." She smiled, and we sat in silence. Let them panic. Let them run in circles. For once, they were the ones without answers. And for the first time in a long time, I had peace. The invitation was simple, one line typed in bold at the top of an official envelope. You are hereby summoned to the reading of Ruth Whitaker's final will and testament. It landed like a bomb in the middle of Daniel's kitchen table. Linda drove straight to Mr. Thompson's office, demanding to speak with him. Brian showed up an hour late, smelling like stale beer and confusion. None of them knew where I was, and that terrified them more than anything. They hadn't lost me. Not really. What they'd lost was control. The reading took place in Mr. Thompson's private conference room. Tall bookshelves, polished wood table, nothing fancy, but heavy with seriousness. Daniel came in first, in a wrinkled suit like he'd rushed from a meeting. Linda clutched her purse like it might comfort her. Brian slumped into a chair, chewing gum, pretending not to care. Then the door opened again. Sophie stepped inside, calm and composed, holding a small notebook and a folder under her arm. They all turned to look at her. You? Daniel sneered. Sophie said nothing. She simply took the seat at the far end, next to Mr. Thompson. He cleared his throat and opened the folder in front of him. Let's begin. Mr. Thompson read the will slowly, clearly, each word slicing through the air like a blade. To my children, Daniel, Linda, and Brian, I leave the following. There was a pause. Nothing. The room fell silent. Not because I stopped loving you, Mr. Thompson continued, but because you stopped seeing me as your mother. You saw me as a bill, a burden, something to manage, and I decided I no longer wanted to be managed. Brian sat up straighter. This is a joke, right? Daniel's face turned bright red. She was clearly manipulated. This isn't legal. Mr. Thompson raised a brow. It was updated 3 years ago, signed, witnessed, and notarized, well before she entered the nursing home. Linda's hands shook as she whispered, We didn't mean to hurt her, but the damage was done. Then Mr. Thompson turned to Sophie. To my granddaughter, Sophie Whitaker, I leave the full contents of my estate. The family home, the lake cabin, all financial accounts, jewelry, personal belongings, and vehicles, and sole authority over any remaining medical or legal matters. He looked up at her and added, Because she showed me kindness when no one else did. Daniel jumped to his feet. This is theft. You can't just skip your own children. Sophie didn't flinch. She pulled out the folder she had brought and calmly placed it on the table. Inside were photos of the nursing home, mold on the walls, expired medicine, ignored patients. She had documented everything. Mr. Thompson slid another envelope across the table. And here are statements from Ruth's doctors confirming she was of sound mind when she made these decisions, along with letters written in her own hand. One to each of you. Linda opened hers and gasped. Brian didn't touch his. Daniel stormed out, slamming the door behind him. After they left, Mr. Thompson turned to Sophie. She did this to protect herself, but she also did it to thank you. Sophie looked down, voice trembling. I didn't do it for anything. I know, he said. That's why you're the one she trusted. Outside, the sun had begun to set. The world felt still, like something important had ended. But for me, it was just beginning, because from the comfort of that lake cabin, I watched everything unfold, not with bitterness, but with relief. They finally understood what they threw away, and I hadn't even said my final word. Yet. I hadn't planned to show up, not at first, but when Sophie called and told me what happened at the reading, part of me knew it wasn't finished. The will was just paper. What I needed was to speak, not for revenge, not to gloat, just to be heard, one final time. So I asked Sophie to arrange it, a private family meeting, one last gathering, one last truth. They all came, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of fear, maybe just to fight for whatever scraps they thought were left. Sophie rented a small hall near the lake cabin, plain, quiet, neutral. I stood behind a curtain as they filed in. Daniel in another stiff suit, red in the face. Linda clutching tissues, her eyes puffy. Brian, slouched and silent, avoiding eye contact. When they were seated, Sophie walked to the front. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "There's someone here who wants to speak with you directly." The curtain slid open, and there I was, alive, standing, stronger than they'd seen me in years. Daniel's mouth dropped. "What the—" Linda covered her mouth in shock. "Mom?" Brian just stared, frozen. I stepped forward, my cane tapping softly on the wood floor. "Hello, children." For a moment, no one said a word. Then Daniel stood, angry. "You faked being sick? You ran away? You made us believe—" "I made you believe what you already thought," I interrupted. "That I was weak. That I didn't matter." I looked at each of them, my voice calm but firm. "I heard everything that night in the living room. When you said I was too expensive, too much work, too inconvenient. And instead of confronting you, I decided to watch, to listen, to see what you'd do when you thought I couldn't fight back." Linda was crying now. "Mom, I didn't know what to say. I didn't mean for it to go that far." "But you said nothing," I replied. "Silence can be louder than words, sweetheart." I turned to Daniel. "You were always driven, but you became entitled. You wanted me to be grateful for every half-hearted visit and forced phone call. You saw my life's work as something you were owed." He looked away, jaw tight. Then Brian. "I covered for you. I protected you. Even when you messed up time and again. And still, when I needed you, you vanished. You all did." I stepped back and took a deep breath. I didn't rewrite my will out of anger. I rewrote it because I finally saw who you really were, and I couldn't reward that with inheritance. Sophie stood beside me, quiet, strong. "She's not taking anything from you," I said. "She's been giving me what you didn't. Love, time, and respect. That's what earned her everything." Daniel stood up again, furious. "So what now? You think we'll beg? You think we'll grovel?" "No," I said, steady. "I think you'll leave. And I think you'll think about this moment for a very long time." I paused and looked at Linda. "You all had a chance to be my family. But you made your choice. This is mine." I turned and began walking toward the door. Sophie reached to help me, but I waved her off gently. I didn't need support. I walked out of that hall taller than I had in years. Outside, the sun was shining through the trees. A breeze rolled off the lake. I could hear birds, laughter from a nearby park, the soft hush of peace. I had no regrets. I didn't destroy their world out of spite. I shattered their illusion, that I would always be there, giving, waiting, forgiving without question. That version of me was gone. And in her place stood someone far stronger. Someone who finally remembered her worth,